Welcome to Not Starving Artist, the podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Benson, money coach and equity actor. I am your financial cheerleader, here to help you build your financial confidence and have power over your money. The best part, no budgeting or bi-weekly paychecks required. I went from being a broke BFA grad having weekly panic attacks about money to a financially confident, wealth-building actor and business owner. Money gets to feel fun, simple, and sexy, and I am going to show you how. Before we dive into the episode, I am so excited to share with you that my brand new online course, Cashed Up Creatives, is officially out now. Now, this course is for my artists with neurospicy brains, my bi-weekly paycheck cuties who just don't want a budget, or anyone who wants to get out of that paycheck to paycheck cycle and finally experience financial wellness. This course is for you. It's gonna help you get 3 months ahead on bills. It's gonna help you pay off debt while you still take vacations. It's gonna help you manage your fluctuating or consistent income with ease. You're gonna be able to confidently talk to your parents or partner about your money decisions. You're gonna be able to open a retirement account and invest your first or next $500. You're always gonna have surplus in your bank account, and it's gonna teach you how to ditch your scarcity mindset so you can feel abundant with money. Now, this is a self-study course, meaning that when you make your one-time payment of $247, you have immediate access to the course content for life. And on top of lifetime access, the best part about what I'm sharing with you today is that for the rest of 2025, I am going to be hosting live monthly office hours for anyone who has joined the course. Meaning, if you join before our first monthly office hours call on March 18th, you are going to get 10 bonus coaching calls with me, totally for free, included with the price that you pay for the course itself. I, of course, recommend joining as soon as possible because the earlier you join, the more of those monthly office hours calls that you are going to get to attend. I cannot wait to see you inside and to help you get cashed up. Welcome back to the Not Starving Artist podcast, episode 100. We're on the 100th episode of this podcast. That is baffling to me. And it caught me by surprise a couple weeks ago when I was putting in the episode numbers. And I was like, oh my God, what is the 100th episode going to be? And because this is one of my favorite topics to talk about, this feels like a very fitting 100th episode. We're talking about money and relationships today, specifically about how to have money conversations that don't lead to financial fights, conflict, tension, how to have healthy conversations about money in any one of your relationships. So we're going to focus mainly on romantic relationships right now. But if there are other people in your life who you have financial conversations with, you can use some of these things to have healthier conversations as well in those relationships. We're also going to talk about Love is Blind because I have obviously been watching season 8 for my reality TV people. I'm sure you have been watching it as well. If you don't watch Love is Blind, that's fine because I'm going to talk you through the situations that I'm going to use as examples of what not to do. No, that's not what this is going to be. I want to highlight and spotlight certain communication dynamics and things that are very common that sometimes we can't notice in ourselves, and we have to see it happen with another couple or with another human to be able to be like, oh, I see how I have a flavor of that in my relationship, or oh, right, this is how I want to do things differently. Because of course, I've joked that Love is Blind is like my Super Bowl because the money conversations that we see / don't see is fascinating to me. And because a huge part of money is like the emotional stuff and the mindset stuff that I think a lot of people aren't super comfortable or familiar with diving into themselves, then when you join with another human who also has their own flavor of financial trauma, right, or financial upbringing, when you put that together and then you don't talk about it or you don't know how to talk about it, it erupts into so much that all of us can learn from, right? So we're going to dive into a lot of that. And of course, I've got lots of thoughts about the people on this season. And this has also been like a shit show of a season. You know, I've been on TikTok and seeing all the backstory of all the people. Okay, I'm not going to rant about Love is Blind quite yet. We'll get there. So we're going to talk about how to have healthy money conversations because money and disagreements about money, conflicts about money is one of the leading factors for people who break up, get divorced, sever a relationship. Financial conflicts are so common. With a lot of my clients, sometimes I coach couples together, but sometimes I'm coaching singular people who are in a partnership or are married or have a significant other. And money comes up a lot in their relationship dynamic that we have to coach through and talk on. Because again, when you're taking two human beings who have different thoughts and practical things that they've learned and ingrained about money and you push them together, shit's gonna come up. And that's normal because money is just one of those things that comes up when you smoosh two people together, right? Like you're gonna have all of your old wounds come up. You're gonna have all of your patterns come up, like the big ones and the silly small ones. There's so much about conversations about money that will bleed into so many other areas of a relationship. Like when we work on money, and I've said this before, but one of my favorite reasons why I love to work on money and coach on money specifically is because money is an indicator and just a slice of how you navigate the world and how you think about the world. And when we start to clean up your money, it just automatically cleans up a lot of the other stuff that felt too messy to even try and clean up. Because how you think about your money is probably how you think about a lot of other areas of your life. Your money tends to be tied to like your worth and your confidence. Your relationship with money is tied to like what you believe you can have in this world, your lifestyle, and also like your goals and your dreams. Like money is attached to all of it. And then how you communicate about money or how you communicate about things that feel like hard conversations is going to be a magnifying glass on like how you navigate other kinds of hard conversations. So when we zoom in on money, we see a lot of other things that aren't just money related. So I think this is why money is a huge reason why people break up and get divorced. It's because money shows you a million other things that you don't love about the relationship or that are reasons why you should break up or just not get together in the first place. But it's really easy to pin things on like, oh, it was the one specific financial difference, or it was this one specific money issue. But money tends to be an indicator, a symptom of a lot of bigger things. And I don't just mean like, if you don't have a lot in the bank account, that means you're this kind of person. That's not what this is. It's more about how you think about money, how you talk about money, and how you see your relationship with money. That is going to be the indicator of bigger things. So I want you to think about like two different human beings, right? Coming into a relationship. You're going to come in, each of you, with different ways of practically managing your money and also different flavors of money trauma, right? Or like your thoughts and mindset about money. I want you to think about, I was just talking to my sister about this because she's moving in with her girlfriend very soon. And she was talking about like, oh yeah, like now we have to like talk about the roommate stuff, right? Like how do we each do laundry? And it's not until you get with another human being and you start living together, right? Where you realize that not everyone does laundry the way you do. And it's really funny to be confronted with that. So like I think about my partner and I, like the first time we did laundry together in our first place together, it was like, oh, wait, okay, yeah, do we do all of our clothes together? I don't separate my whites and my colors. Do you separate your whites and your colors? And he was like, no, I put them all together. And I'm like, oh, great, me too. But it's like, it wasn't until I was shoved up against another person, confronted with my own just habitual way of doing things, that I was like, oh, right, not everyone does things this way, right? Or even when we think about like how you do dishes. Are you someone who leaves them in the sink for a while? Are you someone who has to have it in the dishwasher within like 3 minutes of using it? Are you someone who piles up dirty dishes on the left side of the sink and the right side of the sink is reserved for the clean dishes? Is it kind of outside of the sink is clean, inside of the sink is dirty? Like there's so many different ways you could navigate dishes. So that's the practical piece, right? But then there's the trauma or the thoughts or the mindset behind it, right? Like trauma is a heavy word for how we do dishes or how we do laundry. But like, for example, if there is, you know, in the dishes example, let's say someone leaves their dishes in the sink for like multiple days on end, and another person is like, no, we put them in the dishwasher right away. You might have a fight because you're both like, well, no, I do it this way. No, that's crazy that you do it this way. We should do it this way. But then you get deeper and it's like, oh, here's why I leave my dishes in the sink for multiple days. It's because like I have, overload in my brain of all the tasks I need to get done. And I'm in a really crazy busy season with work. And that means that all of my like energy has to go towards that. And so maybe my solution then is to use disposable plates so that I don't pile up dishes, because I know myself and that's not going to happen. But tell me why you don't like to see dirty dishes in the sink. And then they talk about how when they grew up, their whole family, we just left dirty dishes in the sink, and it always made me gag because like we would have fruit flies and I vowed that I would never have dirty dishes in the sink. So now you're getting to the deeper layers of like why the practical action that you're seeing on the surface level is being taken. And then I already alluded to this, but then you get to like the root of the why, and then you can talk about like, okay, so if I need this and then the other person is like, I need this, how do we solve this together? Great. If you literally cannot see yourself being able to do a dish, we're going to go out and buy paper plates and plastic bowls and disposable cutlery, and that's what you'll be able to eat on. So you can just throw it away, and then we don't have dishes in the sink, but you're not required to do something that you physically can't see yourself doing, right? So then you come to a solution. So it's the same thing with money. And I think with money, it feels like there's a much more like rigid way that money has to be done. And there's like less up for debate on like how it gets managed and how it gets talked about. But it's the same exact way. Like there are so many different ways to practically manage your dollars, to go about spending, to go about saving, to go about your day-to-day money life. And there are so many different flavors of financial trauma. There are so many different mindset blocks or ways of thinking about money, or different ways that your relationship with money is going to work. Just like no two human beings' relationship will ever be the same. Like you can't say that like me and my partner have an identical relationship to like my friend and theirs partner. Like you can't say that. That's not how relationships work. So my relationship with money will not look like anyone else's relationship with money, right? And so knowing that coming in, you and the person that you are spending your life with or potentially will be spending your life with will, and I'm also, let me be clear, the lens that I'm going to be talking about this with is a monogamous relationship, okay? Like when you are choosing one singular other person to share a life with, okay? So that's the lens that we're going into this conversation with. So you're both going to come in with different mindsets and different relationships with money. And so the important thing is that you figure out how to articulate and talk about the two different places that you're coming from. You don't have to be completely equally aligned. You don't have to have been raised the same way. You don't have to want to manage your money in the exact same way, but you do have to be able to communicate about it. We're going to talk about, I'm going to get to this when we get into the Love is Blind thing, but the phrase like, you don't have to agree on everything to have a healthy relationship. And I actually kind of think that's bullshit. We'll get to it. But what I do want to say is you are allowed to have different ways of doing things and different ways of thinking about things. You just have to then come together as a team and decide how you're going to navigate together moving forward. All right? I also want to say that there is no correct way to manage your money as a couple. There is no specific blueprint that every couple needs to function with. So if we're talking very practically, having fully joint bank accounts, or having totally separate bank accounts, or having some joint and some separate bank accounts, all of those different kinds of money flows can work. I have worked with clients and couples who have had all three of these different versions, right? Totally separate, totally joined, and a hybrid. My partner and I, we actually have totally separate money flows. We split expenses though. Oh, and this is another thing, like how you decide to split expenses and pay for your lifestyle. Does one person pay for everything? Does one person pay for a certain tier of things, right? Like maybe the mortgage, rent, and bills, and the other person pays for like the vacations and the groceries. Or is it completely 50-50 down the middle? I don't know. This is something that my partner and I just like inherently did. And so many other couples like don't do this. And we never really had a conversation about it. We just like fell into it. But when we get groceries, we never shop at the same time. We don't do like a family grocery haul. Like we both shop completely separately because we do not eat the same things. We eat so differently. So when we do eat meals together, we get a meal kit now, and that's like within the past year. But before that, like we had dinner together all the time, but we were usually like making separate things. We had a couple of meals that would cross over of like, oh, we both like this thing, but like we completely shopped separately for groceries. So for us, having completely separate bank accounts, like the only expenses we really split are like vacations and like our rent and our bills and things. Everything else is separate for us because we don't actually overlap on a lot of things. But do you see how that's like a personality thing? Do you see how that's very specific to our relationship? Where I was coaching a couple who was having their second kid, right? And so for them, all of their finances are joined, right? Because they are fully supporting like another human being. And for a time, one of them wasn't working, right? And then it flopped and then the other one wasn't working. So what they decided was like, we just need everything pooled in one place. And we're going to figure out how to navigate the priorities of spending that we each have to make sure it still fits within our total financial ecosystem. But all of their bank accounts were together. And that was mainly because they had a family and they had now a second kid on the way that they were providing for and compiling resources in order to support. So again, no right way to do this. There are so many ways to do this, but that is why the ability to converse in a healthy way about how you want to navigate your money is the most important money skill inside of your relationship, okay? Because here's the thing. If you don't know how to have a money conversation that doesn't end in conflict, your only other option is to not talk about it. Because most of us are pretty conflict averse. Like none of us are like going into something being like, yeah, I want to fucking yell. I want to fight. Some people, sure. But like, that's not normally how people go into a conversation. You normally don't want to have a conflict, especially if it's a conflict that comes up over and over and over again. So if your money conversations always end in conflict or tension, you're not going to want to continue having those conversations. So your only other option is to stop having them. If you want to avoid conflict, you have to stop having the conversations because you don't know how to have a conversation that doesn't end in conflict. Meaning, financial tension is always going to lead to financial infidelity. So if you and your partner have financial tension and you're not able to talk about this, it will always lead to money secrets. It will always lead to financial infidelity because you don't want to have to fight, but you have things that like you need to talk about, but you're not going to talk about. And so then you just end up keeping the secrets in order to keep the peace. Again, we're going to talk about this when we have seen an example of this inside of the Love is Blind couples of this most recent season. Financial infidelity and secrets in general inside of a relationship, like we know this, that's not healthy for a relationship. Money is not an exception. I want you to be able to be fully financially transparent, get financially naked in front of your partner, potential partner, current partner, and feel safe doing so. I think that's a big thing. Like I need you to be able to feel safe doing that. And I want your partner, your potential partner, to be able to feel safe doing that back. Because if you're not able to get financially naked, you are going to end up harboring secrets. And secrets will erode a relationship, okay? So you need to learn to have these conversations before you get into like the long-term relationship. You need to, and this is me talking to people who are not currently in a long-term relationship or like are on the cusp of a long-term relationship. I want you to think about having these conversations now, sooner rather than later. Like before, if you're, someone who's excited about getting married, like you want marriage to be a part of your life moving forward, before you get engaged, like when you're starting to talk about getting married, I hope that you all have had eyes on each other's bank accounts, okay? Do you know what that person has in savings? Do they know what you have in savings? Have you talked about how you spend, how you manage your money, what your financial goals are for the future, how you plan on hitting them together as a couple? What is the income gonna look like, right? And this is so like, if you're moving in together, right? Even if you're not getting married, but you're moving in together, before you move in, have you had those conversations of like, how are we going to split bills, right? Are we going to buy groceries together? Are we going to buy groceries separately? When it comes to like our price range, what feels good for us and why, right? Like having those deep conversations is a must before you enter into a joining of lifestyles. Money is not just this thing that like can be worked out down the road no matter how people are feeling about that. Like money needs to be one of those things that you talk about right away. Like money is a core value. And we just need to, maybe we should just start talking about Love is Blind right now, because like core values are something that are deal breakers. It's okay that money is a deal breaker. Now, that doesn't mean that like if someone doesn't make a certain amount or doesn't have a retirement account, that is a deal breaker. The deal breaker is, are you able to have conversations about it? Does that person shut down every single time you try and bring it up? Does that person get really defensive and like you're not able to crack through that wall? Does that person like not want to show you what's inside their bank account? And if that's the case, have you had a conversation about why and when they would be able to show you that, right? Like it's more about being able to have the conversation rather than what you actually see in the bank account. You need to be having these conversations alongside those other big conversations like, do you want kids? Do you want to get married? How do you feel about what's happening in the world right now? Right? Like temperature check. And now I want to speak to my people who are already in partnerships and already in relationships. If you haven't had these conversations before, or you didn't have these conversations before there was like a real joining of lives, whether that was moving in together, getting married, maybe even just like energetically, romantically, just feeling like you are now fully partners. If you didn't have those conversations before, that's okay, because you can have those conversations now. That's what's so wonderful about being in I'm assuming if you are in a long-term relationship, it's because you deeply love and cherish this person and you align on a lot of other things. Meaning, it is most likely the case that you're going to be able to open the door to having healthy money conversations now, even if you weren't able to before. We're going to talk about some practical ways to do this near the end of the episode, so don't worry. You know I'm always going to leave you with an action list. I'm always going to leave you with some practical stuff to play with. But I just want to say, you can now start to open that door if that's become a stronger value for you. So first things first, in order to have healthy money conversations, you have to be having solo conversations yourself with you and your money. You need to understand what your current blocks are around money, or not just blocks, just what your current thoughts are about money, the narrative that runs through your head about money, what you desire for your financial life, what are your goals? And then how do you manage your money? Like, do you actually have a system? I mean, everyone has a system. I talk about this whenever I onboard a new client and we start adjusting their money flow, right? We write out their financial ecosystem. We talk about their bank accounts, how money's coming in and going out. We go through all of that. And they're like, yeah, I don't have any system at all. But when we write it out, it's like, no, you do have a system. You might just not have been consciously aware that you created a system. So like maybe your system is, I put everything I can into savings, and when my checking account gets below, $100, I pull $2,000 from my savings and I try and make that last as long as possible. Like that might not be a very effective system for the financial goals you desire, but that is a system. So are you aware of how you currently function with your money? If you've been here a while and you've been listening to these podcast episodes and you've been working on your money mindset, you did the 10-day money affirmation series that's on Instagram, you have been implementing your own money flow. If you are a client and you and I have worked together in the past, right? Like you've been doing this work already. Are you able to articulate it out loud to yourself and be aware of what's happening for you right now, or how things maybe have shifted in the past few months or in the past year? That's the the first thing, because in order to have a money conversation, you need to understand what's happening with you first so you can articulate it to another human being and then have the capacity to get curious about them, right? This is why people go to therapy, so we can figure out our own shit, so we don't bring our own shit into a relationship with another person who also has their own shit, right? Like, we got to figure out our shit first in order to have cohesive shit with another human being. So that's the first step. So practically, in order to get in tune with your own money mindset, money narratives, relationship with money, I highly recommend going through that 10-day money affirmation series that's on my Instagram. I did it back in January. So if you scroll back, they're all labeled on my Instagram page. And every single day we go deep into one single affirmation, and I give you lots of tools to really see and unlock what's going on in my brain about money. Where and why am I feeling scarcity? Where do I feel the most abundant? What do I believe is possible for me? What affirmations do I feel really solid about and I feel like are true? And what ones feel false? Why do they feel false? So you're going to have a lot of this feelings data to bring to the table when you talk to a partner about money. And then getting clear with yourself about, like, how do I manage money? And getting why you want to understand your mindset stuff is so you can have language to articulate why you manage your money the way you do, right? If you've started to implement some of the money flow method principles, right? Like, you're separating your bills, like your firm money, from your flex money. And then you also have a savings account that has a bucket feature, and you manage it once a month, right? Like, if you've been implementing that and your partner asks about it, you can say, like, I wanted to implement this because my income fluctuates and I never really had a really good grasp on what I was making and what I was spending. So this system really helps me see it clearly. Why I want to see it clearly is because I am an anxious person, or I tend to make really, like, rash, impulsive decisions if I get stressed. And so what this system helps me do is see things clearly so I don't make impulsive, rash money decisions. So this is helping me stay calm with my money. Do you see how then you're able to articulate that? Right? You're able to articulate it in order to then open up a conversation to be like, hey, how do you manage your money? I'm curious about why you manage it the way you do. I'm not saying my way is the perfectly right way. I mean, the money flow method is one of the best ways to manage your money, but I'm also open to hearing how you manage your money. And then tell me why you manage your money that way. So understanding your own finances and your own relationship with money is the first step to being able to have healthy money conversations. Now, alongside this, something I also want you to be clear on are, what are your financial deal breakers? What are your money rules that you're not willing to compromise on? And you might not have many of these. When my partner and I started dating, my only deal breaker was not being able to have a money conversation with him. That was my only deal breaker. And that was more like, can we have a conversation where, you know, this might feel like a vulnerable thing to talk about, but is he willing to open up? Do I feel safe opening up? That was my only deal breaker. If I felt any energy from him that was like a closed door or something that was going to result in tension. So that was my only deal breaker. But I also have worked with clients who have had a lot of, like, financial trauma in their past, where with one of my clients, we were talking about her getting back into the dating world, right? And being afraid of some of the previous financial things that happened in previous relationships coming back in a new relationship, and it was making her trepidatious to want to start dating again. So we talked about, like, what are your money rules? What are you going to decide is okay and not okay in a future partnership? And one of the things we talked about was not lending money to a future partner. That's something that had happened in the past for her and had burned her, right? Like, even though there was a lot of trust and a lot of love there, that ended up burning her. And because it happened multiple times, we decided that, like, that was not going to be something she was okay with doing moving forward. So if a man ever asked her to borrow money, that was an immediate no, because her boundary and what she decided was she didn't want to be with someone who would even ask her to support him in that way. And that was specifically for her in her specific situation with what she specifically had gone through. That rule made sense for her because that rule gave her safety moving into a new relationship. And it was deciding that she was allowed to have that rule, right? That she was worthy enough to have that rule, that there was a man out there who would respect that boundary, right? Like, do you see how money is so intrinsic with our worthiness? Deciding that your rules with how you function with money in a relationship are worthy of being respected. Okay. I had another client who we talked about, like, with something that happened in her past relationship, like she would not join bank accounts until they were officially married on paper. So that was a money rule that she had. I had another client who talked about like how they split expenses, and like there was something, I'm not going to go into all the details of it, but there was something specifically about expense splitting that was a deal breaker for her. And so with all of these things, like these might seem like small things or like very like, oh, are you really gonna have like that be a deal breaker when you have all these wonderful things about the relationship? Yes. Yes, because if we think about it, the kind of person that client who wanted to be with someone who wouldn't ask her to borrow money, that was a much bigger thing than just asking to borrow money. That was about the kind of person he was. That was about the kind of responsibility he had. That was about the kind of financial autonomy he brought into that relationship at their age, at that stage of the game, okay? Where then for me, right, when I met my partner, I was very young when, I mean, not young, but like I was in my early 20s, right? That's pretty young. But at that point, I didn't have any of those like strong deal breakers. And because of the kind of lifestyle I was living, I was like, the only thing I need is that we can have a very open conversation about it, and to even see if we're on a trajectory that we could see going on together. Like I didn't have a full vision of my future life. I mean, do any of us really? But you get what I'm saying. So for me, I didn't care that my partner, or not my partner at the time, right? Like this man who could potentially be my partner, who is now my partner, I didn't need him to have a retirement account. Like that wasn't a deal breaker. If I was like, if you don't have a retirement account, we are breaking up because I value money. Like that's ridiculous, right? For me at that time. But if I was in my mid-50s, and I was in the dating sphere, as Brooke right now with my brain, if I was seeing someone who did not have a retirement account, that would be a deal breaker. That would be a deal breaker. And that's because we only have a certain amount of years before I'm clocked out. I mean, probably at 55, at that point, I am clocked out, right? Like I'm work optional. I am wanting to like live it up the last chunk of my life. And if my partner doesn't have the financial autonomy to be a part of that and is still tethered, like then lifestyle wise, life value, goal wise, now we have a much bigger chasm that we would have to bridge, right? So maybe at that point in my life, not having a retirement account would be a deal breaker. But at 22 and 25, that wasn't a deal breaker. The deal breaker was, are we able to have a conversation about why me having a retirement account open is important? And I want to understand and get curious about your thoughts about a retirement account. I want to understand your financial future goals. Like, how do you see that playing out? Like, do you vision about the future? Like, I just wanted to be able to have that conversation. So do you see how it can look so different for every relationship? So I want you to sit down and think about, what are your financial deal breakers, if any? You should probably have at least one. Bare minimum, your deal breaker should be, if I try and bring up money 3 different times and every single time it is shot down and never talked about, maybe that's a deal breaker, okay? That should be your baseline. But are there other things that you want to add in? Now, having those things in place make it easy for you to come into a money conversation. So now let's move into the Love is Blind territory. Let's talk about Virginia and Devin. So this is a couple where in some of the earlier episodes, we saw Virginia be very clear saying, I want a prenup. Okay. And Devin had never really thought about that before. And this is because most men don't think about prenups, right? And because the women we're the ones that have to protect ourselves most of the time inside of a marriage relationship, right? A legally binding contract, protecting herself, right? With this man that she just met. And he had just never thought about it. Cause like, why would he have to? He would probably be fine if they got divorced, right? He's not thinking much about it. So for him, that took him off guard. And he was like, I'm going to have to think about it. But the communication that we saw here is Virginia wanting to have a lot of these conversations, but she was always the one who was bringing up the conversations. Devin was just fine, hunky-dory, just to be like, oh, gorgeous woman, likes me. She wants me to, be a coach. She's going to take care of the fam. Great, I'm in, right? And he didn't have to think much more than that. So Virginia wanting to have those conversations was always the one having to bring them up. And then he didn't really have much to say about it. So she's like, okay, because you're not going to ask me what I think, and I have very strong, clear boundaries, money rules, things I desire and want, I'm going to tell you. So the prenup was one of them, okay? So she shared about the prenup. He had that reaction, but he was pretty lukewarm about it. And she was like, okay, so if you're not saying no, that means it's a yes. Then that was her hearing an agreement when there wasn't really an agreement. And I mean, this is on him too, right? Like he was saying things that were agreeing sort of, but when we can see it, like third party viewer outside, we're like, oh my God, this man absolutely does not want to do it. I was shocked when he actually signed. Also, these are going to be Love is Blind spoilers. If you're listening and you haven't watched it and you don't want it spoiled, pause, go binge the series, come back. When he signed the prenup, I was actually very shocked, okay? Because it was very clear to me that he had strong thoughts about what signing a prenup meant. That meant you didn't have trust in the relationship. He clearly did not trust her. But that showed me how much he wanted to avoid conflict, how much he just wanted that wifey, okay? So he signed that prenup, and then guess what fucking happened? And this is also, this is a smaller part than I think what the bigger issue was that she wanted to talk about like values and politics and how do you feel about things that are very close to my heart, right? Where she's like, I believe women should have the right to abortion. I believe that everyone should have rights, right? Gay marriage should not be outlawed. Like all of these very clear values and things she believed in. And he did not confirm, right? And we found out in the reunion that like he said some stuff off camera about what he believed and it did not align with what she believed. But we saw on camera the conversation about that was the same pattern. She was like, do you have anything you want to ask me? Because she had the thought, we clearly haven't talked about this and I need you to know, but you don't seem to care, but I care. So she's like, okay, here's what I think. What do you think, my dude? And he was like, yeah. Again, very lukewarm sentiments. Okay? She heard that as like, okay, well, it's not a full disagreement. I mean, we saw her kind of clock it, right? And be like, okay, we are probably not in full alignment. But then, right, like down the line, those values are just inherently at odds. So then that's why we saw at the altar, she said no. He was somehow shocked, right? But she said no because she's like, these things are clearly not in alignment. And we find out that he got a $1,000 check as a wedding present and didn't tell her, right? Because he didn't trust her. And he had thoughts about what a prenup meant for a relationship, but they didn't talk about it. So see, financial infidelity, money secrets, not being able to have full financial conversations led to financial secrets, okay? Which then ended up tearing apart the relationship. Not specifically that thing, but like that communication pattern. Okay, when we zoom in on one money conversation, we're able to see a bigger communication pattern that shows us the health of a relationship. Which brings me to the platitude, the thing that people always say, which is you don't have to agree on everything to have a healthy relationship. Absolutely the fuck you do. Absolutely you do. Hot take that should not be a hot take. You do have to agree on everything to be in a relationship. Now there's nuance here. So here's what I want to say. You can disagree on things, but the things you disagree on, you're in agreement that those disagreements don't mean anything, right? That they're so low on the value totem pole that they don't mean anything. So, for example, right? Like, let's say, I'll use my partner and I again as an example. He really loves craft coffee, like really nice craft coffee. I could not care less. Give me my Wegmans Original breakfast blend. Like, I do not care. That disagreement, we are fine because we agree that that doesn't mean anything about who we are, the kind of life we get to live. He gets his coffee, I get my coffee, right? We grocery shop separately. So we both have our own coffee. It's not a problem, okay? So to jump back to Love is Blind now, because this platitude, you don't have to agree on everything, is usually used to shame women, usually, to wanting to break up over a core value difference, okay? And we saw this with Sarah and Ben and Virginia and Devin, where their core values were at odds. And they were feeling guilty about the fact that that might be a huge factor in whether they said yes or no. So we ultimately saw them say no at the altar because of these differences, because both of these men, extremely entrenched in the religious sect, right? And had very archaic views about what it meant to be a... This is where my religious trauma comes up. I grew up in the church, and I've had to do a lot of unlearning and processing of trauma that came specifically from the Christian religion. Thank God for my parents, who have also been growing alongside my sister and I, and what that all meant, and processing and moving into our own realms. Anyway, just very thankful for my parents and my family, but that doesn't negate the fact that I have all this shit from just the fucking mega thing that this Christian sect has become, okay? So as I'm trying to articulate clearly, that's what's coming up here. So we're watching these two men, right, try and play the middle with their values. And these women, even though Virginia is also religious, she has a very different manifestation or views on what being religious means to her when it comes to societal policy and views. Women should have rights to abortion. Sarah also in the same way, she has a gay sister, and her man goes to, or her previous man, right, he went to a church that did not believe in gay marriage, did not believe that they should have rights. That's a crazy core value difference. So it makes sense that you would need to break up over that. But this platitude of you don't have to agree on everything. Yes, you do. Because what Devin and Ben were looking for, they were looking for someone to agree with them on how much those kinds of values didn't mean much to them. So there still would have been an agreement, right? And if you and someone else who have different political views, right, which now just kind of mean your values and your views of the world as a whole, if you differ on those, but you still are fine in a relationship and you don't care that you differ on those, you're in agreement that you don't care. And you're actually probably more politically aligned than you might say, right? If you don't actually care. So the fact that it was a deal breaker for them was baffling to these men, because for them, that wasn't a deal breaker because it was so low on the totem pole of actual core values of what they were looking for, right? Because it doesn't affect them as much. And the thing, let me just rant for a second. Sarah saying that Ben was one of the most empathetic people that she had ever met, right? Empathy doesn't mean just kind and nice. Empathy means nowadays that you are fighting and speaking up and raging against the bullshit that is harming other people, right? That's what empathy looks like now. And why I'm so disappointed in these women is because at the reunion, we found out that after the altar, they both tried to continue the relationship with these fucking men. They both tried to, right? Sarah was going to move with Ben to Nashville. Do I want to keep this in the episode? Because I'm about to rant for a second. Yeah, I'm going to fucking keep it in. It makes me so angry and sad for Sarah's sister that the fact that Sarah was willing to be okay with those views of Ben, knowing, and this is where you don't even have to be related to someone for that to even mean anything. But that's even crazier when you are related to someone who you love so much. The person that you are with actively does not care about your oppression. That's insane to me. Okay, I just had to cut myself off. I was ranting for a minute. This episode, this season of Love is Blind was actually quite hard for me to watch, specifically Sarah and Ben, and with again, my specific flavor of religious drama, and all of that coming up. And I have a trans sister, so watching someone who has in their family, someone who is in the queer community, and was going to let a man into her life who was not an active supporter of their rights, like, it's fucking insane to me. And I see red. And there was a lot of screaming at the TV as I was watching it this season. But I just say this to say that, and I mean, this is a money podcast, but like, you are worthy of deciding the kind of person you want to share your life with. Like, it is okay that you do not settle for anyone unless they are in full agreement with you. This whole, like, you don't have to agree on everything, but what if you want to? What if you want to agree on everything? You are allowed to say that that's what you want, and then fucking wait for that. Fucking manifest that. Fucking go find that. You want someone who can easily have money conversations with you that doesn't feel like you're having to fucking armor up and go to bat every single time you talk about money? You deserve that. You get to have that. No, of course, focus on you and cleaning up your side of the street to make sure it's not on you why the conflicts keep happening, right? But you get to decide what your core values are. You get to decide what you're willing to accept and what you're not willing to accept. So with all of that being said, let's bring it back to money conversations, because I want to give you some practical tools now of like, okay, so Brooke, how do I actually do this? Great, let's talk about it. Monthly money dates. You and your partner, or you and your potential partner, right? And I'm not saying you have to do this if you're like a month into dating, but like a couple months into dating, this should be a thing that you like are continually talking about. Monthly money dates. This means that you are sitting down once a month to chat about your money, to look at your money. So the financial CEO party that I talk about doing with yourself, especially if you have a business too, you do it with your business, you do it with your personal life. I have a podcast episode, I actually have two, doing live CEO parties and talking about what monthly money dates look like. Do one with yourself, but then do one with your partner. So if you have combined finances, you're going to do a CEO party together where you check in with your money. Even if one person is in charge of the bank accounts and has access to the bank accounts and the other person doesn't, this is your chance every month to be able to look at it together, to ask questions together. Now, everyone in the family should have access to that login, right? It should be easily accessible by both people in the partnership. But you can look at it together once a month. But if you have separate money flows, like this is what my partner and I do. We each have our own CEO party, and then we come together and we like share what's in our bank accounts. We share what's going on. We share what our goals are. We share our wins. Like we have a little moment together just so we're like up to date. It's kind of like, you know, when you come home and you're like, what happened at work today? And you like share stuff with each other. That's what you're doing with your money. Like, what's going on with your money today? What's going on with your money this month? That's what this is. So monthly money dates, what this routine does is it prepares everyone involved for when you're going to have the money conversations. So, and this is something, you know, I learned being someone who is very money aware, money conscious, fine talking about money. That's a skill I learned, but that's now who I am as a person. I found that I'm fine at talking about money anytime. Someone comes up, asks a question, my partner wants to talk about it. Hell yeah, baby, let's sit down. Let's talk about it. My partner, on the other hand, was new to like the emotional side about money. And he was realizing he had some like anxiety and trepidation at the very beginning around talking about money. So me springing money conversations on him throughout the month, I was like, ooh, yeah, this is my bad, right? I need to make sure he knows when we're going to have these money conversations so he can get himself comfortable. And that way, I'm also comfortable knowing that we are going to have money conversations, that it's not just going to be something that keeps getting pushed off and pushed off and pushed off, right? So having that time set aside helps the people who are avoidant of money and the people who are like hyper not avoidant. What's the opposite of avoidant? Right? Whatever. Just like you're constantly wanting to talk about it, right? And constantly wanting to look at it or don't have a problem talking about it. That's what this money date does. So the other thing is a tool that you can use if you're like, well, I don't even know how to start having money dates. Use an external resource to start the conversation. So I've had a lot of people use the online course, my Cashed Up Creatives portal, as a way to start having money dates where it's like, hey, let's get this course together. Let's go through the modules. Like, let's do one a month. And what that does is it puts the like questioning and the material and the knowledge externally. So you and your partner can come as a team to the external source and be like, ooh, that's interesting. Oh, I don't agree with that. What do you think? And it opens up conversation and gets things flowing. And it gives you a format to walk through where you're kind of covering your whole financial wellness. But you can also do this with like a book, right? Maybe you go get a book about money from the library and you both decide to read it. And like every month you have like a little book club and you talk about the things you learned, what you liked, what made you question things. You can do this with like a podcast episode. You could even say, right, Not Starving Artist podcast, or even we have our episodes on YouTube. Hey, I'm really interested in this episode. Do you want to listen to it? And then can we talk about it? Something as simple as that to open up the conversation. But there's also so many resources you can do this with. The Financial Diet, they have a really great YouTube channel where they have like quick videos. They have long video essays every month. You could look at one of those. You could even use like a conversation that someone else had that you heard, right? Where you can even make up the conversation, right? Of like, oh my gosh, my friends were talking about this insert financial topic or thing that you want to have a conversation about. They were talking about this. I'd love to hear your feelings on it. Or like, do you have thoughts about that? Here's my thoughts I was having. Here's the questions I have. Using something external to be able to spark that conversation or start those questioning can be a really great way to start having those monthly money dates. And make sure they're on everyone's calendar, right? That you know that they are sacred as your date nights, right? It should be a date and it should be fun, right? Have a fun cocktail, go out somewhere, like make it a date. Make it a date so you actually look forward to it. It's not like, let's sit down in front of the spreadsheets in my office. Like, no, absolutely not. So this is where like knowing your feelings is important. I had a client who this was the exact situation where like whenever they talked about money, they would go to his office and sit down in front of his computer and he would pull up the spreadsheets and show them where they were going wrong with their spending and their money. And it made her feel like, oh, I'm like being kind of sat down and told what's happening that's wrong and like being scolded, and I don't like that. So to be able to articulate that, right, to her husband, to be like, hey, here's how I feel. I don't like that I feel this way. And then her husband could then share like, oh, because I have the biggest monitor in my office, that's why I thought we would do them in here. And when I pull up the spreadsheets, it's because that's the only way my brain can make sense of the numbers, right? Like, here's why I want to look at the numbers, because I want to make sure that we don't go into the red. So like, what are your solutions? Okay. So it's about knowing yourself and knowing how to articulate what's feeling good and what's feeling bad. That's going to be important, because then this is then another tip of how to have these money conversations is leading with curiosity. Okay. So in that conversation, it's like, okay, so why does it feel important to you to look at our money in this specific way? Or why does seeing this specific kind of spending really stress you out? Why does it scare you that I want to implement the money flow method or that I want to move out of Bank of America, right? I've had a lot of couples have to like talk to the other partner about why they want to move banks and sharing then their feelings, understanding themselves, but then getting curious about like, why does that make you trepidatious? Like, seriously, tell me, like, I'm actually so curious. So then you're not just hearing their friction or their opposition to what you're sharing. You're getting to the core why of like, oh, that makes sense why you feel that way. But then here's what I've been learning, and this has actually quelled that fear. Do you want me to tell you more about it? And then like asking consent, right? Not just like, okay, let me also say, if you're here listening to this podcast, you are probably someone who is excited about being money conscious or has already began their journey in financial wellness and really enjoys this stuff, or you're learning to enjoy this stuff. It's really easy to get so excited and just want everyone else to be on that same wavelength with you, okay? Listen, I have been there. This is literally what I do for a job. And I was dating someone who at the time was not at all interested in really thinking about future financial goals. And now this man, he's fucking crushing it. Retirement, debt paid off, full savings account, making six figure. He is fucking crushing it, right? And at the beginning, we were able to have conversations, right? To be able to get us to this point, because I could see that for both of us, there was an alignment with where we wanted to go in the future. We were just like, we had started at different points and had different benchmarks we were hitting at different times, right? Like, that's the human experience. That's a human journey. So if you're someone who's super excited about this stuff, I want you to not bite your tongue, but I want you to lead with curiosity rather than like, let me sit you down and show you the power of compound interest. Let me show you the money flow and we're going to do this because it's good. And like, no, here's exactly how to rid yourself of that specific flavor of financial anxiety because that's what I did in this money affirmation series and da-da-da-da-da. That might be really overwhelming for them, right? So leading with curiosity and asking why, and then asking for consent of like, hey, I actually went through a similar thing, or I actually had a similar thought. Can I share with you what helped me? Does that feel like it would be helpful for you? Or like, why not, right? Again, why? To get to the core of things. And then you get to the super probably inner child core that's just like wounded in a very specific way. And then it makes you go like, oh, okay, baby, yeah, let's figure that out together. That's the place you always want to get to, right? And a reminder that as you're implementing these things, it will take time. You're not going to like fully get in alignment on your financial life in one monthly money date. Okay. It's going to take a series of money dates. It's going to take a series of conversations to really understand each other. And there's never going to be a time where you feel like done and like fully in alignment with every single thing. And every single time we talk about money, it's all super perfect rainbows and butterflies. But what's going to happen is you're going to find yourself being able to bring up hard stuff and then come to combined solutions together because you flex this conversation muscle, because you understand what their financial triggers are. So if you see or hear something happen or they bring something up, like you know why that's happening. Okay. So again, you as a team are navigating financial stuff together rather than like both of you feeling at odds with each other. So it's okay that it takes time, but opening up the conversation window via these monthly money dates is the most important thing. Thanks so much for tuning in. Come join me on Instagram for more on how to build a simple, sexy relationship with your money. My Instagram handle is @NotStarvingArtists. And if you want to dive deeper with me, head to the show notes to learn more about one-on-one coaching. If you love this episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend that you want to get rich with.